This is The Chris Berry Show. Expert information on elder law, retirement, and estate planning. Information that you can understand. Here's your host, Chris Berry.
Welcome to The Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. Every Sunday at 2 p.m. And each week we like to start The Chris Berry Show with a positive focus, something positive that happened during the week. And for me this week, it was spending time with family. We live on a lake. My parents live a couple houses down. We have some good friends that are neighbors, and we just enjoyed some lake living this weekend where we took the pontoon boat out. One of my neighbors, he actually started this project last year, but he built a floating platform where he took some barrels, took some wood, and built a 8x8 floating platform. So this weekend we together got it into the lake, which was an event in itself. And then we kayaked it over to where the pontoon boat was, and then it was actually kind of fun. We took the pontoon boat out, attached this floating platform to the back of it, and grabbed a bunch of the neighborhood kids, and we had about 7 kids, a couple adults watching over the kids. But it was great to just spend time on the lake, both Saturday and Sunday. And boy, were the kids tuckered out after that. I have 2 young children, Ryan, who's age 7, Madison, 5. They enjoyed the weekend, but oh my gosh, were they exhausted by the end. And then spent some time working on my grill as well. Made some armadillo eggs, which are chorizo that's wrapped around a jalapeno with some cream cheese. It was delicious, and it's great learning all these new grilling recipes. So that was my positive focus for this week, and it's something that I think it's important. We start every show with a positive focus. When I sit down for dinner with my family, we always start with something positive that happened. It sets the tone for the rest of dinner, the rest of the show today. So today on the Chris Berry Show, we're going to talk about some scams to watch out for, some elder abuse, financial exploitation. It's something that's come up in my practice over a number of years. I'm going to tell some stories of some of clients that have ran into potential issues. Then I'm going to talk about some things to watch out for moving forward, some of the hot scams right now, things to watch out for. Then I'm going to talk about ways to protect yourself from some of these financial exploitation or these financial scams that are going around right now. So we're going to spend some time talking about that in our second section of our show today, our second segment. And then our third segment, as always, we're going to answer some of our listeners' questions that they've submitted either via the phone or email. And if you do have a question that you want us to take a shot at answering on air, shoot us an email at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com, or you can give us a call anytime at 810-355-2584. Again, 810-355-2584 if you do have any questions, and we'll take a shot at reading some of those questions on air and providing you some answers. So also one of the exciting things that was kind of fun to watch this week, getting back to being on the lake, was my son. He's getting pretty good at the stand-up paddleboard and kayaking. He's our little swimmer. He's a little fish. But it was fun watching the kids play where my son Ryan, he would basically provide a taxi cab service for the other kids where he'd kind of ride them out to the platform and then back to the beach and then to the dock and then back to the platform. Kind of interesting seeing him just kind of providing this service to the neighborhood kids. It was kind of fun, and it kind of reminds me of the service that we provide, or just being in service, and that's really what we are for our clients. We're always in service to our clients. So it was good to see Ryan doing that, taking that into account in being in service to the neighborhood kids. And then also one of the exciting things that happened this week is I spent some time, I got away for a couple of days, went to a national conference where we talked about asset-based long-term care strategies. So one of the things that I'm constantly trying to do is constantly improve, constantly learning new strategies or the best strategies to help our clients. And I added it up one time. I spend about a month of the year in some type of continued education setting, whether it's a setting where I'm presenting on a topic or I'm sitting there learning from other national experts. And so this week I had the opportunity to travel to St. Louis to attend a national conference where we discussed strategies in terms of long-term care, specifically tax-free ways to provide for long-term care. And we looked at a lot of what's called asset-based long-term care strategies. And we spent a whole show talking about asset-based long-term care strategies, but I think it'd be important to review the concept because it's something that's relatively new. And when I mention the word long-term care insurance, a lot of people think of the old or traditional style of long-term care, the pure traditional long-term care insurance policies, where you would pay on it for a number of years, and then all of a sudden the premiums would increase on you after you've paid on it for 20 years. And a lot of people think it's based on their age, like, now that I'm getting near the point where I'm going to need long-term care, they're going to raise the premiums on me. That's unfair. Well, it might be unfair, but that's not why or how those premium increases were occurring if you did have a pure traditional long-term care insurance. What the insurance company actually had to do is they would have to petition the state to across the board raise those premiums. And they've done that for a number of years. A lot of times people might have, I can almost guarantee if you have a traditional long-term care insurance policy, you've had at least one premium increase. If not more. In fact, I had a colleague of mine, his parents had a policy that they had paid on for over 20 years. And then one year, and this was a number of years ago, the premium increased 40%. And then the following year, it increased another 80%. And so they were left with basically three options. Do they pay the higher premium? Do they take a reduction in benefits? Or do they let the policy lapse? And so that's one of the big issues with that pure traditional long-term care insurance. Then another big issue with the pure traditional long-term care insurance is not only can they increase the premiums on you, but what happens at the end of the day if you pass away peacefully in your sleep? All of those premiums that you paid to the insurance company are lost. It's almost like a homeowner's policy. If your house doesn't burn down, you don't get paid off. So if you don't need long-term care, guess what? That money you're paying into that pure traditional long-term care insurance policy is going to be lost. So out of this, there was a new long-term care strategy that came about. And it's something that I'm a big fan of. And again, this is what I spent some time this week in St. Louis talking to other advisors and attorneys about, is this concept of asset-based long-term care. Asset-based long-term care, where it's not your pure traditional long-term care insurance policy, but what it is an investment that if you do need long-term care, it can pay out long-term care benefits, but also if you were to pass away peacefully in your sleep without ever needing long-term care, it can provide a death benefit to your beneficiaries. So it's pretty powerful. So you're either going to need long-term care or you're going to pass away. But either way, it's going to pay out. And then the nice thing with this is that once you kind of buy into it or you're locked in, there can never be any type of premium increases. Or sometimes the policy can be set up so that there isn't even an annual premium. So let's look at an example of how this might work. And also one of the cool things with this is that with this asset-based long-term care, it's something that can be used to protect your retirement accounts, to protect your IRAs or 401ks or those pre-tax accounts, a way to build some leverage protection for those types of accounts. So let's say you have $400,000 inside of your IRA. So this money is pre-tax money. And let's say you own a home, and that's really all of your assets. Well, what would happen if you needed long-term care? If you had a stroke or if dementia kicked in or Alzheimer's and now you needed long-term care? How would you go about paying for that? Well, you'd have to pay for it out of your IRAs, right? Well, what has to happen before you can utilize that IRA money? you have to pay the income tax, right? Because the money went in pre-tax. It went in pre-tax, meaning you haven't paid any income tax on it yet. So to be able to access those funds inside of the IRA to pay for long-term care, not only would you have to access those funds to pay for long-term care, but also you'd have to pay the income tax on it, right? So let's look at that same example, but what if we had an asset-based long-term care strategy in place, where let's say you had $400,000 inside of your IRA, but now let's carve out maybe $125,000. It's still pre-tax. It's still inside of your IRA, but now that $125,000 buys you a $4,000 a month long-term care benefit for your lifetime, meaning it's not going to run out. So if you go through the long-term care journey of needing home care and assisted living and nursing home care, whether it's a 3-year journey or 5-year or 10-year journey, that long-term care benefit isn't going away, because with these asset-based long-term care policies, we can build in a lifetime of benefit. And that's something that you don't see with those pure traditional long-term care insurance policies. You don't see an unlimited lifetime benefit. So with this asset-based long-term care strategy in place, what you've done is you've leveraged your IRA money, your pre-tax money. So now if you were to suffer a stroke or need long-term care, instead of getting into your IRA money, you'd have this leveraged $5,000 a month long-term care benefit that's going to protect you, protect that IRA money, allow you to spend that money on other things so that you don't have to worry about what if I need long-term care in the future. But then what happens if you pass away peacefully in your sleep and you never utilize that long-term care insurance policy? Well, the nice thing about asset-based long-term care is that it could be a death benefit to your beneficiaries. So that $125,000 could turn into a $150,000 death benefit to your beneficiaries. And the crazy thing about this type of strategy is that this benefit, whether it's a long-term care benefit or a death benefit, could potentially be tax-free coming out of those IRAs. Because what happens is internally, the required minimum distributions, once you reach age 70 and a half, are paid internally inside the policy. So this is a way that you could leave tax-free money to your beneficiaries or tax-free money to pay for long-term care. And so this is what I spent some time going over and reviewing the latest strategies. Spent some time this week in St. Louis working with some national experts on just analyzing the best ways to put together these types of asset-based long-term care strategies. And it's just one of the ways that we can look at paying for long-term care. There's also legal strategies involving setting up asset protection trusts as well. But what I really like about this asset-based long-term care strategy is that it's money that could be utilized to pay for home care, to pay for assisted living, to keep people out of a nursing home. So it's a way to really empower us to make choices with regards to our care. Because that's really what it's all about at the end of the day, is being able to have choices. And by utilizing an asset-based long-term care strategy, it gives us more options, provides us more options on the table, more choices. Because the more choices we have, generally the better outcomes we're going to have. Because it's really about protecting that quality of life as we're planning for our second half of life. And that's what we talk about here on the Chris Berry Show, is wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And in our next segment, what we're going to get into is some of the issues I've seen with some of my families and clients as they're kind of navigating retirement and kind of running into some issues where there's some bad apples out there trying to take advantage of seniors. And we're going to talk about some of the elder abuse, some of the financial scams that I see people falling into. And so this next segment, we're going to talk about some of those common issues that I see. We're going to talk about 7 scams that we see going on and some of the classics that have been around for a while. And then we're going to talk about some strategies and ways to try to protect yourself, to stay vigilant against these scams and hackers and that type of thing. And that'll be on our next segment. And then the third segment, as always, we're going to get into some of our listener listeners' questions. So if you do have a question, if you run into a financial or legal or tax question that you want us to answer, feel free to give us a call at 810-355-2584 or shoot us an email at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. And we'll get to your listener questions in our third segment today. And again, in our second segment, we're going to talk about some of the elder abuse that we see going on. And if any of these kind of topics are of interest and you want to learn more, then one of the things I recommend is that you go to our website, thechrisberryshow.com, and there's going to be some resources there available to you. But also, if you click through there, you're going to have an opportunity to attend one of our free workshops. And we do these workshops about once a week at one of our different locations throughout Metro Detroit, whether it's Bloomfield Hills, Livonia, Novi, or Brighton. And these are free workshops. They're open to the public, but you do have to RSVP. So if it's something you're interested in, you can go to our website and click through and register right there. Or you can give us a call at 810-355-2584, and we can send you some more information or a list of our upcoming workshops. And it's a great way to learn more about planning for the second half of life. And next week, I'm actually traveling to another national workshop, going to work with Ed Slott, who's one of the national experts on retirement planning and managing those IRAs. So I'm super excited to attend that national event, rub elbows with some of the national experts, and I'm sure I'm going to have some great information to bring back to all the listeners here of the Chris Berry Show. So join us after the break as we get into talking about some of the financial exploitation we see, some of the scams, learn ways to protect yourselves from those. Join me after the break. This has been Chris Berry on The Chris Berry Show, where we talk estate, wealth, and tax planning for the second half of life.
If you or a loved one is facing long-term care costs, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm, like Sherry Skelton and her family did from Fenton.
My mother has Alzheimer's. My mom just had a regular will. She didn't have anything set up in a trust. And Chris set up a brand new will, and he got everything rolling. Chris has been extremely helpful. My mom would never have gotten my dad's VA benefits if it wasn't for them. Laurie, who actually did a lot of the paperwork for the VA, she was like my new best friend. I talked to her probably 2-3 times a week, and we would be on hold together while we were waiting for the VA to pick up. We were approved, and we never would have been able to do that if it wasn't for them. I can't even begin to tell you what he did for my family.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Protect your assets from probate, long-term care costs, the IRS, and get the governmental benefits you deserve. Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800.
Welcome back to the Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. Now, this segment, we're going to get into some of the scams, some of the financial exploitation, some of the elder abuse that I've seen, and we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can protect yourself, things to watch out for. So, as an attorney and counselor and advisor, we've been doing this for over 13 years, so we've seen some things. I had a client a number of years ago, very nice family. We had a husband. He was in his 70s at this point. He was an engineer, retired engineer, and his wife was a homemaker. And it was one of those very classic families where the man handled all the finances, the woman kind of ran the house, was a homemaker, but wasn't really in charge of the checkbook. And so what had happened is that unfortunately he had dementia, but it was one of those kind of forms of dementia where you could have a conversation with him and everything seemed normal, but just some of his financial decision-making kind of went askew. And so when the family contacted me, I met with the family, actually the daughter first, and what had happened is that the husband, he had been great with money. He was an engineer. He kind of handled his own finances, and they had about previously about $2.2 million. So they're well off. They're doing pretty well. But over the past year or two prior to coming into our office, he had been scammed out of about $300,000. Where he had been kind of talked into buying gift cards and shipping them off to Haiti. And somehow he thought it was a good investment. And unfortunately, the wife, she just didn't have the financial wherewithal to be able to curb this behavior, or didn't know what to do. And so this is when the daughter got involved. And so in this situation, we wanted to make sure that he still had his independence, but we had to kind of curb this behavior because we wanted to make sure that the wife, who was still healthy, that she would have funds to live off of as well. And so what we did in this situation is we set up a special type of trust where basically we put a majority of the wealth basically into this piggy bank so that the money would be protected for the healthy spouse. And then we still gave him some kind of free spending money. So it still allowed him to have his independence, but the family was comfortable that if they lost kind of that free spending money, that the wife still would have been okay. Because it's hard when someone has dementia. You can't just take away all of their independence. It's not a black or white thing. There's a gray area. And one of the crazy things with these different types of scams out there is that it seems like if you fall for one, all of a sudden you're going to get bombarded in the mail, by phone, by text. It's almost like they have this own little underground scam network. But that was a situation that we were able to kind of curb further loss for the family, try to protect what they had. But it was sad situation to see. And it's sad to just think that there's these bad apples out there putting together these scams. Another issue that we run into, and unfortunately I've seen this one too many times as well, is I call it elder abuse, where sometimes the bad apple is a family member, where it's a family member taking advantage of mom or dad, and that's always sad to see. For example, I had a client where the son brought in mom. Mom was advanced in age, had a little bit of dementia, but still kind of trying to manage things herself. But she had daughter that was living with her, and unfortunately daughter had taken about $200,000 from mom over about 5 years, leaving mom with almost nothing at this point. And one of the things that we joke around with in our office is we always say, screw the kids. We want to make sure that mom or dad or whoever we're planning for first is taken care of. Then we worry about the kids. So it was a sad situation where daughter was basically milking mom for all she was worth. And now mom was going to start needing long-term care. And because of all these gifts and just the lack of funds, she wasn't going to get the care that she needed anymore. And so in this situation, because of mom's deteriorating decision-making, she was kind of going along with the daughter scams and giving money to the granddaughters, but we were recommending a guardianship to basically protect mom from herself because she was falling for daughter scams. So unfortunately, the bad apples aren't always mysterious villains. Sometimes they can be family members. So it's things to watch out for, and especially upon our seniors. And too often we see this happening with our seniors. So it's something that we have to be vigilant in watching our family members. So now what I'm going to talk about is some of the common scams, and these are 7 common scams we're seeing these days. And the first one is called smishing or spoofing. And what this is a text-based scam. So if you get a random text on your cell phone with a link to click here, and then you end up clicking there, then all of a sudden these kind of bad apples are going to have access to your phone number, and they might sell your phone number where now you're going to get a bunch of different calls, or they might be able to use it for as part of an identity theft, where maybe they can then call you to try to get a social security number or address from you. So one thing to watch out for are texts from unknown numbers asking you to click a link, something you always have to be careful for. So that's smishing or spoofing. Then the next one is the shimmer scam. So what this is on your debit cards or your credit cards, you see that little kind of metallic box. It's basically where they try to get access to your credit card. They might put a little device on an ATM where now they get your credit card number. So that's something to watch out for as well. It's been done a lot of gas pumps. So be careful. Try not to use your debit card or credit card all over the place. Be careful with that. The third one is Facebook-like or Facebook-like farming. So with the advent of social media, sometimes we don't understand kind of what privacy we're giving up. But there'll be a lot of Facebook-like farming where now that you've liked something on Facebook, they're going to get access to some of your personal information. And now you're going to start seeing some things, maybe further advertisements geared towards your personal likes on Facebook. Something to watch out for is especially those Facebook games. You're opening yourself to some potential liability there by accessing all of those. Nothing in life is free, so Facebook and those ads have to be paid somehow. So be careful with what you're liking. Another one, and this is kind of a common one, is with the pop-ups on your computer. So this number 4 we'd call tech support fraud. So sometimes you'll click through on something, and then all of a sudden you'll get a pop-up saying that you have a virus or that you need to click through to clear off some malware or something like that. You have to be careful with this. Don't recommend clicking on those pop-ups. Instead, maybe turn off your computer and restart it. So it can be kind of tricky playing around on the internet. Number 5 are what we call the white label ticket scams. And so how it works is you might be searching for an event and you find it through Google. Say you want to go to the opera or go to the Tigers game or something like that. And you click through and you say you find some tickets and it might be for $300. Well, when those tickets arrive in the mail, the actual tickets you just bought might only be for $25. The remaining $275 would be just hidden fees. So watch out for those white label ticket scams. Recommend buying directly from the provider. Number 6, we have ransomware. And the way ransomware works is criminals hack into your computer files, maybe because you click through to a phony link or maybe one of those pop-ups. And then what they can do is they can then basically lock down all your data and hold it for ransom. So all of those pictures you saved of family, your important files can now be locked down. And the only way that you're going to get access to that data ever again is to basically pay these hackers off so that now they can free your data from you. So be careful again with those links that you're clicking through. Then number 7 is online charity scams. So unfortunately, this is a sad one that's popping up. So there's various websites doing things like GoFundMes, where it'll be a sad story and you can help donate to a family. In fact, one of my friends, or one of the families at my church, they just had their house burned down. And so there's a GoFundMe set up to help raise money for them. Or I had someone that I did CrossFit with. He passed away, and he was a father, family of 4, passed away in an auto accident. And so there's a GoFundMe set up to help raise funds for the family because unfortunately he had no life insurance. There's good causes out there, but you have to be careful with these GoFundMes. So some people are setting up these GoFundMes where it'll be real information, but for example, it might be about someone who has cancer, but they actually don't have cancer. So you have to be careful with these GoFundMes. Make sure that you really know what's going on. Make sure that whatever story they're telling you on that GoFundMe page is actually a true story. So let's say that you do fall for one of these scams. What can you do? Well, First thing is to report that scam. So whether you start with the local police, a lot of times that's the best option. AARP has a fraud watch network that you can call at any time. That number for that AARP Fraud Watch network is 877-908-3360. So that's where you can report any potential scams out there. Also, one of the best things you can do is think locally. So a lot of times these are kind of national outfits. But if you're working with someone that you know, generally it's going to be your best option is to just think locally. And so who do these, what can you do to try to protect yourself? Well, it's important to understand who gets scammed and why. So just be careful. See if you might fall into any of these categories or your loved ones might fall into any of these categories. So the first one is being eager for bargains. Okay, sometimes if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. Something to be very careful with when you're buying things, or even some of these like Craigslist or Facebook shops. Be very careful. If it looks too good to be true, chances are it probably is too good to be true. Second kind of category of people that can get scammed would be people who might be susceptible to persuasion. So this is where we get into elder abuse. As we age, sometimes maybe dementia kicks in. We don't have all of our faculties. Things aren't firing as quickly as they were. That's why a lot of times it's seniors who get scammed in these situations. Lacking a defensive strategy. So try to prevent the fraud in the first place. Don't click through to websites you don't know. Don't click on links and emails and text from people you don't know. Kind of be defensive. Next, people willing to take risks. So if you're a risk taker, again, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. And then the kind of last category of people who tend to get scammed are people facing a rough patch. So if you're going through a tough time, whether financially or you lost a loved one, again, you might not be kind of at 100% when it comes to your decision making or your ability to spot a scam when you see one. So if you are going through a hard time or a lot of stress, be careful, because that could be a time where a better chance of you getting scammed than normally. And then there's kind of four classic scams that are still going on. And the first one is IRS imposters. In fact, luckily it didn't go through it, but I had a family member where they got one of those IRS calls where they try to say, hey, you might have a tax refund available. Provide us some information and we'll get that to you. Another big one is the home repairs and security checks. Con artists have been known to go door to door to say, hey, we'll do some kind of home repairs, that type of thing. And then either they don't do it or then they potentially rob that person. Another one of the classic ones is the grandparent scam, where you get a call in the middle of the night from a grandchild who needs you to send money when it's not really that grandchild, or maybe you'll get a note or an email saying, hey, I'm stuck overseas and I need money. And then, of course, the last one is of the classic scams is the lottery sweepstakes, where you provide a Social Security number and because you're the winner of some type of prize, but they're just trying to get your personal information. So those are things to watch out for. So those are some of the common scams, financial exploitation that we've seen, as well as some strategies to try to protect yourself from those. And the most important thing is if it's too good to be true, it probably is, and you need to stay diligent, because it's sad, but there's so many bad apples and con artists out there. You need to take active steps to protect yourself. So hopefully that was helpful for you. And in our next segment, we're going to get into some of our listeners' questions. So join us after the break on the Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. I look forward to seeing you after the break.
The cost of long-term care can be overwhelming. If you're dealing with long-term care costs, make plans to attend the next free informative workshop from the Elder Care Firm in Brighton. They'll show you how to protect your hard-earned assets and obtain the governmental benefits you deserve, including veterans benefits and Medicaid.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. As the only certified elder law attorney in Livingston County, I have the knowledge and estate planning strategies to help you. When you call, reserve your seat at our next workshop or schedule a free 15-minute phone consultation. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Spots are filling up for the next free Elder Care Firm workshop. Reserve your seat today by calling 810-214-3800 or visit theeldercarefirm.com. The Elder Care Firm also invites you to join them at this year's Walk to End Alzheimer's. The Remembrance Night is on September 20th, and the walk is on Saturday, October 1st in downtown Brighton. Call 810-214-3800 today.
Welcome back to the Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. Now, in this segment, we're going to get into some of our listeners' questions. So if you do have questions that you want us to read and answer on air, feel free to call us anytime at 810-355-2584, or you can shoot us an email at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. So if you do have questions, feel free to email us or give us a call anytime, and we'll take a shot at answering those questions on air. Now, keep in mind, the information here, it's just general advice. We recommend you always sit down with a professional. But let's get into some of those questions. Actually, before we get into those questions, I want to let you know what we're going to talk about next week. Next week, we're going to get into talking about some of the basics of retirement accounts. 401ks, IRAs, just the different types of accounts, when you should look at investing in those. So join us next week, again, Sunday at 2 p.m. on FM 101.5, AM 1400, The Patriot, as well as iTunes. You can download us and listen via podcast at any time. I'm a big fan of podcasts. Whenever I'm driving, I'm almost always listening to podcasts. I think it's a great way to get great information. So you can go to iTunes or you can go to thechrisberryshow.com to get access to those podcasts. So let's get into some of the questions we had this week. And the first one is from William. And William asks us a question: where do I register a living trust? So William's asking us, it sounds like he has a trust. Does he have to register it? How does that work? Well, first I want to clarify the difference between a will and a trust. So your last will and testament, that's something that has to go through probate court. So a lot of times people will register their will at the probate court. You don't have to, but upon death, you're supposed to bring it to court. So we would say that the will would be registered at probate court. So William is asking, what about a trust? Where do I register a living trust? Well, the great thing, William, about a living trust is that you don't have to register it at probate court. Okay, the whole purpose of a trust, or one of the purposes of a trust, is to avoid probate. So it would kind of be defeating the purpose to take that trust down to probate court, because we want to keep people out of probate court because it's costly, it's time consuming, and who likes going to court, right? So the trust does not get registered at probate court. So then you might be asking, well, how does anyone know the trust even exists? Well, the thing about a trust is that you don't register the trust anywhere. The trust doesn't list your assets. What has to happen is where your assets are, that needs to list the trust either as an owner or a beneficiary. So if you have a checking account or savings account, William, it would be in your name, but then you might say the trust is a beneficiary or payable on death, so that you can write checks, but then when you pass away, it flows into your trust. Or if you have an IRA or 401k, you might list the trust as a beneficiary of that. Or a life insurance policy, you'd want to list the trust as a beneficiary. But you don't have to register the trust. You just have to make sure that these different assets point to the trust somehow. And we call that funding the trust. For example, your home, we might do what's called a ladybird deed for your home to say that the home is in your name while you're alive, but then when you pass away, it flows into the trust. So hopefully that was helpful, William. Again, you don't have to register the trust at probate court, but you do need to make sure that all of these different assets are pointing to the trust, whether it's through beneficiary designations, deeds, payable on death designations. All of that needs to be pointing to the trust. Now for our second question, and this is from Laurie. She was a listener from the previous week because she has a couple tax questions here. And if you remember, we went over the tax changes and talked a little bit about tax planning. So Laurie actually has two questions here. So the first question is with regards to the standard deduction. We talked about that $24,000 standard deduction, meaning that everyone, or if you're married filing jointly, you're getting a $24,000 deduction of your taxes. And so she had a couple questions related to that, specifically with regards to the medical expenses and charitable deductions. And it's both basically the same answer to both. So we'll just take in this medical deductions. So she was asking, well, if you have a $24,000 standard deduction, how does that 7.5 medical expense deduction work? Is that on top of the $24,000 standard deduction? And to answer that question, no, it's not on top of that $24,000 deduction. Basically, you need to have over 7.5% of your medical expenses to even trigger it. But then whatever that deduction is, once we put it towards your income, that needs to be greater than the $24,000. So it's more of an either or. Either you're going to itemize the deductions and use your charitable deductions and medical deductions, or you're just going to take that standard deduction. So it's not on top of your $24,000 deduction. You need to take either itemizing your deductions or take that standard deduction. So, and that brought us to that strategy we talked about last week of bunching your charitable deductions or your medical deductions all in 1 year. So that if it's going to be greater than that $24,000 standard deduction for a married couple, you want to take them all in 1 year. Then maybe the next year you take that standard deduction. So maybe look at big charitable gifts 1 year, or big charitable gifts and medical expenses 1 year, and then the next year you ease off a little bit. So you want to bunch those deductions if you're going to go that route. So that was the first question from Laurie. And then the second question Laurie had is, what are the tax considerations of converting a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA under the new tax plan? Well, this is, I think, a great strategy right now, because right now taxes are basically on sale. So what has to happen is that you have this pre-tax account, this IRA or 401k. It's pre-tax, meaning you haven't paid any income tax on it. But what we have to do is pay the tax on it, and then we can convert it or put it into a Roth, where now it can go tax-free. So the question is, would you rather be taxed on the seed or the harvest? And really what it boils down to is whether you think taxes are going to be higher or lower in the future. If they remain the same, the interesting thing is that it ends up being about equal, whether you pay the taxes now or later, whether you keep it as a pre-tax IRA or a tax-free Roth with that growth. But if you think taxes are going to be higher than they are now, like a lot of experts think, like I personally think, even though I don't have a crystal ball in front of me, like Ed Slotz, who I'm going to work with next week, like he thinks, then it probably makes sense to pay the taxes now, depending on your situation, of course, because most people think that taxes are going to go up in the future. So think of it as you have a mortgage on your retirement accounts. Because you haven't paid the income tax, so you have this liability. But it's like a mortgage in the sense it's an adjustable rate mortgage. And our current president, President Trump, he just lowered that tax rate for us. So he just lowered our adjustable rate mortgage for us. So taxes right now are basically on sale. So if you think taxes are going to go up in the future, then I would recommend sitting down with a professional and look at what we call bracket bumping strategies. Figure out how much tax you're willing to pay now to get out of that partnership with Uncle Sam, with the Internal Revenue Service. Because that's basically what you have with those pre-tax accounts. You're in partnership with the IRS, and you're If they decide to raise taxes on you, well, guess what? The value of your IRA just went down because now you have more tax liability. Doesn't it make sense to get out of that partnership sooner rather than later? So, Laurie, hopefully that was helpful for you. Now we're going to get into our third question. And our third question is, can I apply for guardianship for my wife? And this is from John. She has dementia and cannot drive or make decisions for herself. How do I help her? Well, we've had some shows on topics similar to this. We've talked about dementia and Alzheimer's planning. In fact, the whole month of June, which was Alzheimer's Awareness Month, we had a couple episodes talking about this very subject. And you can get access to those old shows by going to thechrisberryshow.com, where we have podcasts. But to answer your question, James, there's a lot that goes into applying for guardianship for a spouse, or for anyone, really. And we don't like to go the guardianship route first. We think that's kind of the nuclear option because now you're taking things to court. And my goal is always, if possible, to keep people out of court because court can be messy, it's time-consuming, it's stressful. Plus, now you're leaving it up to someone else to make decisions. So ideally, we try to avoid the guardianship route if we can. And so we start with the powers of attorney. So what I would recommend is that if you have not yet, is that you get a well-drafted financial and medical power of attorney for your spouse, where your wife would appoint you to make decisions for her, but at this point you would probably not want to appoint her to make decisions for you. Hopefully you have some children or maybe siblings that could serve that role. And once you have that financial and medical power of attorney, that's going to give you the authority to make decisions for her. So to write checks, pay bills, to even make medical decisions for her if she's unable to. So hopefully that will help. Now, the problem with the financial and medical powers of attorney is that it does not take away her ability to make her own decisions. So hopefully she goes along with your recommendations and allows you to kind of take care of things for you. But we've ran into situations where due to the dementia, the person becomes argumentative, or they even take steps where they could potentially hurt themselves. For example, getting into a car and driving. If that's the case, then you might want to look at taking away the keys if you haven't already. But then you might actually have to look at that guardianship route, where now you have to go to courts, petition the court. And what happens with a guardianship is that you have to petition the court, and then the court will send out what's called a guardian ad litem. It's a person appointed by the court to basically be the eyes and ears of the judge. So that person will kind of review the situation, maybe interview your wife if you are going to go the guardianship route, review any medical documents. Maybe there's been physicians who've said that she's unable to take care of herself. So the guardian ad litem will gather all of that information and then present that to the judge. And then from that point, you're going to have opportunity to kind of make your case of why she needs a guardianship. But she will have an opportunity, if she wanted to fight that guardianship. So she could have a court-appointed attorney or hire an attorney herself to say that, no, I don't need a guardianship. While I might not be making the best decisions, I still have my independence. So sometimes we see that situation. And then the court or the judge will then make a decision, and they will first decide whether your wife would need a guardianship. Okay, so that's the first step. And then the second step would be, who would they appoint to serve as guardian? And most likely in this situation, James, they'd appoint you to serve as guardian. But sometimes, let's say you weren't around and it was just the kids, then the judge would have to decide amongst the kids who should serve as guardian. Or the judge can even appoint another attorney as guardian. And a lot of times this attorney might have 250 other wards of the state that they are guardians for. So understand that if you do go the guardianship route, there's a lot of kind of variables that could pop up. And that's what I tell anyone when they go to court. You never know what's going to happen. So be very careful. But ideally, if you can, see if you can get away with just having the powers of attorney in place. And hopefully that she'll go along with that. And she does have to voluntarily sign those. And you might be thinking, well, if she has dementia, can she even sign a financial or medical power of attorney? Well, the answer is it depends. All she needs is what's called lucid moments. So as long as she kind of understands the nature of what she's doing. So if we were to put a financial power of attorney in front of your wife and say, hey, if you sign this, you'll allow your husband to be able to make financial decisions. Is that okay? And then she says, yes, that might be enough to be able to sign that financial or medical power of attorney. She could forget about it the next day or the next hour, but as long as she's having a lucid moment, that might be enough to get that financial or medical power of attorney signed. So hopefully you can go that route versus going the full guardianship route. Because again, a financial or medical power of attorney, a well-drafted one from an attorney, might cost you $300 or $450 versus if you're going a guardianship route, it might be with filing fees and everything involved, it could be over $2,000 to $5,000 to get that guardianship forward. So again, a lot of reasons why I prefer the financial and medical powers of attorney if we can go that route versus the guardianship. But if you have to go guardianship, sometimes it's what you have to do. So hopefully that was helpful for you, James. This fourth question, this is from Todd. So Todd asks, my father died in May. His will stated that my stepmother gets everything. And then Todd continues, do my 4 siblings and I have any rights? This is her third husband that she's been with. So it sounds like stepmom kind of got involved with father. And father may have kind of changed the estate plan. It's a little bit of a dicey situation, but it's one of the things that we can protect against by setting up a good estate plan. So we have a lot of marriages with children from previous marriages. With a good trust-based estate plan, we can protect against this. But to answer your question, Todd, without kind of seeing the trust in the will, I can't really tell you. But if it says everything goes to stepmom, then that's going to be the default setting there. That the only way that you could challenge that would be going to court, which could be kind of messy. You might be able to prevail, but it's going to be messy. I'd recommend that you sit down with a probate litigation attorney to see if there's any way to overturn that. But if the will or the trust says everything goes to stepmom, then unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what your father's wishes were, that's what has to happen. So hopefully that was helpful. So this has been Chris Berry on the Chris Berry Show, where we talk estate, wealth, and tax planning for the second half of life. Join us next week as we talk about retirement account basics, and listen to us every Sunday at 2 p.m. on FM 101.5, AM 1400, The Patriot. And if you do have questions, email us at any time at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. And make it a great week. See you next week.
Learn more about Chris Berry and the Elder Care Firm by visiting online at michiganestateplanning.com. That's michiganestateplanning.com. You can also call Chris Berry at 888-390-4360. 888-390-4360. This program content reflects the opinions of Chris Berry and his guests, not the Elder Care Firm, Prosperity Capital Advisors, or the C.J. Berry Group, and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment or legal advice or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security or to follow any legal or tax strategy. There's no guarantee that the strategist's statements, opinions, or forecast provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses, which would reduce returns. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There's no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. We recommend that you consult with a professional dedicated to your needs. This program is furnished by the Elder Care Firm.
If you or a loved one is facing long-term care costs, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm, like Jennifer did from Howell.
This past summer, my mom had to transition into a nursing home. So we contacted Chris to help get things in order. You know, I wanted the best. I wanted somebody who knew what they were doing. Chris was able to help save a lot of that money that my mom and dad both worked so hard for. I thought that everything would have to go to the nursing home, but it didn't. He was able to save us half of everything that would have gone if we hadn't contacted the elder care firm. And we're all happy about that. Don't go to the nursing home without contacting Chris first.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The elder care firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Protect your assets from probate, long-term care costs, the IRS, and get the governmental benefits you deserve. Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800. 810-214-3800.